Hello everyone, welcome back to the channel. In our previous video, we have discussed section 13. In this video, we will discuss from section 14 to section 17. Section 14 is talking about specific performance of a part of contract where the part unperformed is small. On the other hand, section 15 is talking about specific performance of the part of the contract where part unperformed is large. So we will basically discuss section 14 and section 15 by comparing these two sections. So first we will discuss section 14. What is written in section 14? In section 14 it is written that the court may add the suit of the either party. So under section 14, when the part unperformed is small, both the party can file a suit for specific performance. Direct the specific performance of so much of the contract as can be performed and award compensation in money for the deficiency. So here court can order specific performance of the contract as well as court can order award compensation in money for the deficiency. Here a portion which is small is unperformed under section 14, and for that non-performance court can award compensation in money for the deficiency. So section 40 can be applied if the following elements are fulfilled. First, where a party to a contract is unable to perform the whole of the part of it. So if a contract which is entered into by two parties and one party is unable to perform whole of the part, but the part which must be left unperformed bears only a small portion to the whole in value. So the part which must be unperformed is a small portion, which is also written in side note of the section, that the part unperformed is a small portion. Then section 14 will be applied, and that party admit compensation in money. So the party which cannot perform the whole of the contract and left unperformed in a small portion, then that party is liable to pay compensation in money and he needs to admit compensation in money. Then section 14 can be applied. Here we can take an example. A contract to sell a piece of land consisting of 100 bighas. It turns out that 98 bighas of the land belong to A and the two remaining bighas to a stranger who refused to part with them. So here A cannot perform the whole of the contract because only 98 bighas belongs to him and the other two bighas belongs to a stranger and who is refused to part with that 2 bighas, and the 2 bighas are not necessary for the use of the enjoyment of the 98 bighas. Not so important for the use of enjoyment that the loss of them may not be made good in money. So that 2 bigha is small in portion and it is not so important for the enjoying of that 98 bighas. So first condition of section 98, that a party is unable to perform the whole contract. Here A, who is a party to that contract, is unable to whole contract, and the portion which he is unable to perform is very small in portion and it is not so important for the enjoyment of the rest of the portion of the contract. Here A may be directed at the suit of B to convey to B the 98 bighas and to make compensation to him for not conveying the 2 remaining bighas. So the portion which can be performed can be asked for the perform, and which cannot be performed can be asked for compensation for the non-performance. Here the other party B, who cannot perform the whole of the contract, can also file a suit, and he first needs to transfer 98 bighas of the land, but here he will be entitled to the stipulated purchase money less a sum awarded as compensation for the deficiency. So he will not get whole amount of money which was contracted to be given for the 100 bighas. He will only get the stipulated purchase money less a sum awarded as compensation for the deficiency. Here if we see the screen, here we can presume that in that screen there is 100 bighas of land, and in the corner there is 2 bighas. Though the land is looking so small, but we can presume there is 100 bighas of land and 2 bighas of land is situated here, and A and B entered into a contract to sell that land. Here A was the owner of that land. He thought that 100 bighas belonged to him, but in the meantime he comes to know that he has only 98 bighas and the 2 bighas at the corner belongs to a stranger. Now what will happen is written in this section. Here under section 14, 2 conditions are already fulfilled. The first condition, that the whole contract cannot be performed here, and the second condition, that the portion of the contract which is left unperformed is so small here and it is not important for the enjoyment for the rest 98 bighas. Here both the parties can file a suit for specific performance of the contract. Here if B files the suit for specific performance of contract, then he can get the 98 bighas and he will be awarded compensation for the non-performance of the contract from A. So here A will be bound to give compensation to B and B will get the 98 bighas of land. On the other hand, A can also file specific performance of the contract. Here A will convey the possession of the land to B and A will be entitled to the purchase money less than the sum awarded as compensation for the deficiency of the contract. Now we will discuss section 15, which is talking about specific performance of part of contract where part unperformed is large. So in section 14 the part unperformed is small, but under section 15 the part unperformed is large. Here if we look closely into the section we will find 2 parts. First part is talking about when party in default cannot file a suit for specific performance. In the second part it is talking about in the same situation by fulfilling what conditions the other party can file a suit for specific performance of the contract. So the first part is talking about when party in default. Party in default means the party who cannot perform the contract. So under this section he cannot file a suit, but the other party who can perform the contract can file a suit by fulfilling certain conditions. Those conditions also written in section 15. So the first part we will discuss that there is written where a party to a contract is unable to perform the whole of his part of it, and the part which must be left unperformed forms a considerable portion of the whole, or does not admit compensation in money, is not entitled to obtain a decree for specific performance. So first part of this section, it is saying that if one of the following situation exists, party in default cannot file a suit for specific performance. First is the portion which is left unperformed forms a considerable portion of the whole. So when the part unperformed forms a considerable portion of the whole, then the party in default cannot file a suit for specific performance of contract. Or if the party in default does not admit compensation in money, then that party is not entitled for a decree of specific performance of contract. Here if only one of the 2 situations exist, then the party in default cannot file a suit for a specific performance. So if the party in default who was able to file a suit for a specific performance of contract under section 14, but he didn't admit compensation in money, then under section 15 he will not be able to file a suit for specific performance of contract, because here the language is or. So one of the conditions if exist, then the party in default cannot file a suit for specific performance of contract. This is what is written in first part of the section, where it is written that the party in default when cannot file a suit for specific performance of the contract. Then the second part is talking about the court may at the suit of the other party direct the party in default to perform specifically so much of his part of the contract as he can perform. So other party can file a suit for specific performance in the same situation, and court will order specific performance to the defaulted party. So in order to get specific performance under section 15, when a considerable portion of the contract is unperformed, the party who is not in default needs to fulfill the following condition. He needs to relinquish all the claim to further performance. Then he also relinquish all rights to compensation, either for the deficiency or for the loss or damage sustained by him through the default of the defendant. So he will not get any compensation for the deficiency if he wants to file a suit for specific performance under section 15, where the part unperformed is large. Now we will take an example. A contract to sell to B a land consisting of 100 bighas. It turns out that 50 bighas of the land belong to A and other 50 bighas to a stranger who refused to part with them. So here a large portion of the contract cannot be performed. A cannot obtain a decree against B for the specific performance of the contract. So here, as the part which is unperformed by A is large, so A cannot obtain a decree against B for the specific performance of the contract, because it fulfill one of the situations under which a party in default cannot file a suit for a specific performance of contract. But if B is willing to pay the price agreed upon and to take the 50 bighas which belong to A, waiving all the rights to compensation either for the deficiency or for loss sustained by him through A's neglect or default, B is entitled to a decree directing A to convey those 15 bighas to him on payment of the purchase money. So here purchase money will be paid, whole purchase money will be paid by B, and B will only get 50 bighas. He will waive all rights of compensation. In section 14, the party who is not in default can get a certain amount of compensation for the non-performance of the small portion which is unperformed. But under this section, the portion which is unperformed is large. For that portion, the party who is not in default cannot get any compensation. But under section 14, the party who is not in default can get compensation. If these two conditions, if B can fulfill, then B can file a suit for specific performance. Then we will see specific performance of independent part of contract. Where a contract has more than one part and among them one part is specifically performed and the other cannot be performed, then what will happen is written in this section. Two things are needed to be showed here in order to specific performance of an independent part of contract. So if in a contract there are more than one part and among those part one part can be performed specifically and the other part cannot be performed specifically, then what court will do? Whether court can order specific performance only a part of the contract. Here under section 16 it is said that a court can order specific performance of a part of the contract. In order to do this, a person needs to fulfill two conditions. Such part of the contract stands on separate and independent footing from another part of the same contract which cannot or ought not be specifically performed. So the part which was asked for performance needs to stand on a separate and independent footing from the part which cannot be specifically performed. This part of contract can and ought to be specifically performed. So the independent part of the contract which is asked for a specific performance needs to be showed that that part of the contract can and ought to be specifically performed. If these two conditions are fulfilled, then the independent part of that contract can be ordered for the specific performance under section 16. Now we will see section 17. Section 17 is basically talking about bar in other cases of specific performance of part of contract. In section 14, section 15, section 16, this section are basically talking about specific performance of the part of contract. Here under section 17, it is said that the court shall not direct specific performance of a part of contract except in the cases coming under one or other of the three last preceding section. So if a plaintiff wants to specific performance of the part of a contract, then that plaintiff needs to come under section 14, 15 and 16. Otherwise, court shall not direct specific performance of the part of the contract. It is written in section 17. So this is all about section 14, 15, 16 and 17. Thanks for watching this video.